The steak was perfect, cooked to a flawless medium rare, but the folded piece of paper tucked beneath the bill felt like a shard of ice against my skin. I was supposed to be invisible today, just another customer in a worn-out jacket evaluating one of the dozens of restaurants I owned. But the waitress, a young woman with tired eyes and a smile that didn't quite reach them, had just risked everything. She had seen something in me, and now my simple fact-finding mission was about to become something else entirely. My name is Richard Sterling, and 3 years ago, I inherited Sterling Steakhouses from my father. He'd built the empire from a single diner, a place where he knew every employee by name, where the staff was treated like family. I, on the other hand, had run it from a skyscraper, looking at spreadsheets and profit margins. The numbers for this location were good, excellent in fact. My COO, a man named Henderson, who oversaw this whole region, always pointed to this restaurant as a model of efficiency. But sitting here, in this worn-out booth, something felt wrong. The air was thick with a quiet tension. The smiles of the staff were brittle. And now, this note. My heart hammered against my ribs. I glanced up. The waitress, Sarah, was clearing a table across the room, her back to me. She was trying to look busy, trying to act normal, but I could see the slight tremor in her hands. She was terrified. What could possibly be so important, so dangerous, that she would risk her job to pass a secret message to a complete stranger? Slowly, carefully, I slid the bill to the side. The note was written on a ripped piece of a napkin, the words scribbled in shaky blue ink. I unfolded it under the table, my hand shielding it from view. There were only 8 words. 8 words that felt like a punch to the gut. He's stealing from us. From our kids. Please. He. She didn't have to write the name. I knew exactly who she meant. Mr. Henderson, the star manager, the man I trusted, the man who was supposedly the architect of this location's success. A cold wave washed over me. It wasn't anger, not yet. It was a deep, chilling sense of betrayal. My father's voice echoed in my mind, a memory from long ago when I was just a boy, watching him hand a busboy an advance on his paycheck. "You take care of your people, Ricky," he'd said, ruffling my hair. "They're the heart of the business. If the heart is sick, the whole body dies, no matter how good it looks on the outside." I looked around the restaurant again, but this time I saw it through a new lens. I saw the busboy, a teenager, flinch when Henderson walked past. I saw the cook in the back, his shoulders slumped in exhaustion, working at a frantic pace. And I saw Sarah, forcing another weary smile for a new table, her eyes darting nervously towards me, then towards Henderson's office. She wasn't just a waitress. She was a mother, fighting. The note said, "Our kids." This was bigger than just one person. I had come here to check on my investment, but in that moment I knew I was here to check on my father's legacy, and I had a sickening feeling that I had let it fall into ruin. I placed enough cash on the table to cover the bill and a generous tip, one I hoped would go directly to her. I folded the note, a tiny, fragile piece of evidence, and slipped it deep into my pocket. It felt heavier than a block of lead. As I stood up to leave, my eyes met Sarah's for a fraction of a second. I gave her the slightest nod, a silent promise that I hoped she would understand. Her expression didn't change, but I saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It wasn't hope, not yet. It was the terrifying acknowledgement that the fuse had been lit. I walked out into the cool evening air, my mind racing. The spreadsheets had lied. The profit margins were a fantasy. The success of this restaurant was built on a foundation of fear and injustice. And I, Richard Sterling, the man at the top, had been completely blind. The note in my pocket wasn't just a plea for help. It was an accusation, and it was pointed right at me. That night, I couldn't sleep. The 8 words on that napkin replayed in my head on a loop. He's stealing from us, from our kids. Please. The desperation in that plea was a ghost haunting my comfortable, quiet home. I thought of Sarah's tired eyes. She wasn't just an employee. She was a human being in pain, and I was her boss. Indirectly, her suffering was happening on my watch. The next morning, I didn't go to my fancy corporate office. Instead, I drove to a small coffee shop in a different town, a place where I wouldn't be recognized. I pulled out my laptop and started digging. I wasn't Richard Sterling, CEO, anymore. I was a detective, and my father's legacy was the case I had to solve. I started with the numbers, the very same ones Henderson had always presented with such pride. But this time, I wasn't looking at the bottom line. I was looking for cracks. I pulled up the employee records for that specific restaurant. The turnover rate was staggering. People were hired and then quit or were fired within a matter of months. Good people don't just leave a successful business. They're driven out. Then I looked at the payroll. On paper, everyone was being paid correctly, their hours logged. But I cross-referenced it with the security camera logs from the employee entrance, something that I had access to, but he didn't know I would ever check. The discrepancies were immediate and sickening. Employees were clocking in at 10 a.m., but the system showed them starting at 11 a.m. They were clocking out at midnight, but payroll had them leaving at 10 p.m. Henderson was systematically shaving hours off of every single employee's paycheck. A few here, a few there. It was small enough to be dismissed as an error if questioned, but over dozens of employees, every single week, it added up to a fortune that was going straight into his pocket. The theft didn't stop there. I examined the inventory reports. Huge amounts of premium steaks, expensive wines, and top-shelf liquor were being written off as spoilage or waste. The numbers were impossibly high. A restaurant this busy shouldn't have that much waste. Henderson wasn't just stealing time, he was stealing goods, likely selling them out the back door for cash. He was bleeding my company dry from the inside, all while presenting me with beautiful, fraudulent reports that showed low costs and high profits. He was a parasite, and my employees were his victims. But the note said stealing from our kids. That was the part that haunted me the most. It wasn't just about money. It was about what that money meant. It was the difference between buying groceries or not. The difference between affording medicine or watching your child suffer. My mind went back to Sarah. I had to know more about her. I did something I felt a little guilty about, something that crossed a line, but I had to understand. I accessed her employee file. Sarah Jenkins, a single mother. Her emergency contact was listed as her neighbor, but in the notes section from her initial hiring interview, she had mentioned her son, Leo, who was 6 years old. There was another note added 6 months ago, a request for a flexible schedule due to her son's ongoing medical needs. The request was denied by Henderson, citing business requirements. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just about greed anymore. This was about a complete and utter lack of humanity. I had enough evidence to fire him 10 times over. I could call him, bring him to my office, and end it all in a blaze of corporate fury. But that wouldn't be enough. Firing him wouldn't fix the damage he'd done. It wouldn't repay the stolen wages or erase the fear he'd instilled in his staff. And most importantly, it wouldn't honor Sarah's bravery. She had risked everything for a sliver of hope. I owed it to her, to all of them, to make this right in a way that truly mattered. I needed to see it for myself one more time. I needed to understand the human cost. So, I put on a different disguise, a simple baseball cap and a hoodie. I drove to the neighborhood where Sarah lived, a modest area with small, tidy houses. I didn't want to intrude, just to understand the world she was fighting for. I parked down the street and just watched. After a while, I saw her walk out of her small apartment building. She wasn't wearing her waitress uniform. She was just a mom, holding the hand of a little boy. He was small for his age, with big, bright eyes and pale skin. He was laughing at something she said, a pure, beautiful sound that carried on the wind. But as they walked, he coughed, a dry, rattling sound that made him stumble. Sarah immediately knelt down, her face a mask of concern, and pulled an inhaler from her purse. She helped him take a puff, her hand gently rubbing his back until the coughing subsided. In that moment, watching from a distance, I finally understood the weight of those 8 words. He's stealing from our kids. Henderson wasn't just stealing dollars and cents. He was stealing the money Sarah needed for that inhaler, for doctor's visits, for the chance to give her son a healthy childhood. He was stealing her peace of mind, replacing it with a constant, gnawing fear. The anger that I had been suppressing finally broke through. It was a white-hot, righteous fury. My father hadn't built a company so that vultures like Henderson could prey on desperate parents.
I drove away from that street with a new plan. A quiet firing wasn't justice. I was going to give Sarah and everyone else in that restaurant the one thing Henderson had stolen from them that was more valuable than money, their dignity. And I was going to do it in person. The next day, I didn't wear a disguise. I wore the suit my father had given me when he first made me a partner in the company. It was simple, well-made, and it felt like armor. I walked into the restaurant during the busy lunch rush. The moment I stepped through the door, the atmosphere shifted. The hostess, a young girl who looked barely out of her teens, saw me and her eyes went wide. She recognized me from the company newsletters. Whispers spread through the room like wildfire. "That's Mr. Sterling. The owner is here." I saw Sarah standing by the kitchen doors, a tray of food in her hands. She looked at me, and all the color drained from her face. Her eyes were filled with pure terror. She thought I was here because of her. She thought she was about to be fired in front of everyone. I ignored the whispers and the stares. My eyes were locked on one man, Henderson, who was just now emerging from his office, a smug look on his face that quickly curdled into confusion and then panic when he saw me. "Mr. Sterling," he stammered, rushing over, his hand outstretched. "What a surprise! Had I known you were coming, I would have prepared." I looked at his outstretched hand, and then looked him dead in the eye. I didn't take it. "Oh, you've prepared plenty, Henderson," I said, my voice low and cold, but loud enough for the nearby staff to hear. "I've seen your preparations. I've seen your numbers. The real ones." His face went pale. The entire restaurant had fallen silent. You could hear a pin drop. The diners were watching. The staff was frozen, all eyes on us. "My office," I said, gesturing towards the door he had just come out of. "Now." He practically stumbled over himself to obey. I followed him in and closed the door, leaving the rest of the restaurant in a state of suspended animation. Inside the cramped office, his bravado completely vanished. He was sweating, his eyes darting around like a trapped animal. "Mr. Sterling, I can explain," he began, his voice trembling. "There may be some minor discrepancies, but—" "Minor?" I interrupted, my voice dangerously calm. I tossed a folder I'd been carrying onto his desk. It was filled with printouts of the real-time logs, the fraudulent inventory reports, and sworn anonymous statements I'd gathered overnight from former employees. "You call stealing over $100,000 in wages from your staff minor? You call selling my inventory out the back door a discrepancy?" He sank into his chair, his face ashen. He had no defense. He knew he was caught. "You are a thief and a parasite, Henderson," I said, leaning over the desk. "But that's not the worst of it. The worst part is who you stole from. You stole from a single mother who needed money for her sick child's medicine. You stole from a student trying to pay his way through college. You stole from people who trusted this company, who worked themselves to the bone for you, and you treated them like dirt." I saw a flicker of defiance in his eyes. "They're just waitresses and busboys," he muttered, as if that made it okay. That was it. The last straw. The rage I had been holding back exploded. "They are the heart of this company," I roared, slamming my hand down on the desk. The force of it made him jump. "They are everything. You are nothing. You are a cancer that I am about to cut out. You're fired, Henderson, And I want you to know that this folder, I tapped the pile of evidence, is being sent to the district attorney. You won't just be looking for a new job, you'll be needing a lawyer. He stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. The fight was gone. He was broken. Get your personal belongings, I said, my voice dropping back to an icy calm. Security will be here in 5 minutes to escort you out. Don't ever let me see your face again. I turned and walked out of the office, leaving him to his ruin. I closed the door behind me and faced the silent, watching restaurant. Every employee was staring at me, their faces a mixture of shock, fear, and a dawning, fragile hope. My eyes found Sarah. She was still standing in the same spot, the food on her tray now forgotten. Tears were streaming down her face, but she wasn't making a sound. I walked over to her, my steps feeling heavy. The whole room was watching us. I stopped in front of her. She flinched, expecting the worst. "Sarah," I said, my voice softer now, "can I talk to you for a moment?" She just nodded, unable to speak. I gently took the tray from her trembling hands and set it on a nearby cable. Then I looked at the rest of the staff. "My name is Richard Sterling," I said, my voice carrying through the silent room. "My father built this company on one principle, that we are a family. Somewhere along the way, I forgot that. I hid in an office and looked at spreadsheets, and I let you down. I am truly, deeply sorry." A few of them gasped. They had never seen a man in a suit apologize for anything. "The man in that office," I gestured towards the door he had just come out of, "betrayed your trust, and he betrayed mine. That ends today. Things are going to change, I promise you that." I turned my attention back to Sarah. Her tears were still falling, but the fear in her eyes was slowly being replaced by disbelief. "You wrote me a note," I said quietly, so only she could hear. "You risked everything to tell the truth. I don't think I've ever seen a braver act in my entire life." She shook her head, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand. "I had to," she whispered, her voice choked with emotion. "For Leo. For my son. I know. I saw you with him. At the park." Her eyes widened in shock. "Sarah, my father used to say that the heart of the business is its people. This restaurant's heart is sick, and it needs a healer. It needs someone who understands what it's like to be on this floor, someone who understands what matters." I took a deep breath. "I'm not just firing Mr. Henderson. I'm creating a new position, a regional employee advocate, someone who will travel to all of our restaurants in this area to listen to the staff, to ensure they are treated with dignity and respect, to make sure something like this never, ever happens again. Someone to be their voice." She was staring at me, her brow furrowed in confusion, not understanding where I was going with this. "I want that person to be you, Sarah." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Her jaw dropped. "Me?" she whispered, "but I'm just a waitress." "No," I said, looking her straight in the eye. "You're a leader. You're a fighter. You're the conscience this company has been missing. You're everything but just a waitress." I saw a dozen emotions cross her face. Shock, disbelief, fear, and then finally a tiny, radiant flicker of hope. "And another thing," I continued, my voice thick with emotion. "The Sterling Corporation has a foundation for employee hardship. It's been dormant for years, but I'm relaunching it today. Its first act will be to cover all of Leo's medical expenses. All of them. From now on." That's when she broke. A sob escaped her lips, a sound of such profound relief that it echoed in the silent room. She covered her face with her hands and wept, not tears of sadness or fear, but tears of gratitude, of a weight being lifted that she had carried for too long. I stood there for a moment, letting her have her release. Then I reached into my pocket and pulled out the small, crumpled napkin she had given me. I held it out to her. She looked at it, then at me. "This," I said, "is the most valuable business plan I've ever received. Thank you." A week later, I was back at the restaurant. It felt like a different place. The air was lighter. The staff was smiling, really smiling. I heard laughter coming from the kitchen. I saw the new manager, a woman promoted from within, talking with the busboy like an equal. I sat down in the same booth I sat in before. A moment later, Sarah approached my table. She wasn't wearing a waitress uniform. She was wearing a smart blouse and planks, a notebook in her hand. She looked powerful. The weariness in her eyes was gone, replaced by a clear, determined light. "Mr. Sterling," she said, a real, genuine smile spreading across her face. "Welcome back." "Richard," I corrected her, smiling back. "Please, call me Richard." "Richard," she repeated, trying the name out. It felt right. "What can I get you for?" I looked at the menu, then back at her.
"I'll have the steak," I said, "and I'd like to hear all your ideas for how we can make this place better." She sat down across from me, a partner, an equal. And as she started to talk, full of passion and ideas, I knew my father's legacy was finally safe. It wasn't in the spreadsheets or the profit margins. He was sitting right here, in a worn-out booth, in the heart of a woman who had been brave enough to scribble 8 little words on a napkin. A woman who had, in saving herself, saved us all.